This is NICU Babies Parent Support with Catherine Whitaker, a podcast from Hand to Hold, a national nonprofit that provides free personalized support, resources, and community before, during, and after a NICU stay. My conversations here will focus on education and personal stories with medical and hospital professionals, counselors, therapists, and NICU moms and dads from across the country. Whether you're preparing for a NICU stay, you're currently there, or you're months and years past your stay, you belong here. The NICU is hard. We're here to help. I'm your host, Catherine Whitaker, the mom of 6 children, including my very own NICU baby, and I'm so honored you're here. Welcome back to the podcast, everybody. Thrilled to have you here. April is Occupational Therapy Awareness Month. I don't know if you knew that. You know it now. We had a lot of therapists with our NICU baby. Speech therapy, physical therapy, all the therapies. And definitely we had occupational therapy, primarily focused on feeding and how I can get my baby to grow and get out of failure to thrive and start eating at the dinner table. And I will tell you that I never dreamed when I walked into that room that I would become such good friends with my occupational therapist, my son's occupational therapist. I think before I had an NICU baby, I heard occupational therapy and thought like, what does a pediatric occupational therapist do? Babies don't go to work. They don't put in a 9 to 5, but they put in a 24/7 in that they are learning how to be humans. They're learning how to grow. And certainly my NICU baby was learning how to eat. And so when I was thinking about the people that I really wanted to visit with, that I thought could give you really good advice, but also some good encouragement, was my own son's occupational therapist. So Laurie Layne received her Bachelor in Science in Community Health from Texas A&M University and her Master of Occupational Therapy degree from Texas Women's University in Houston. She has more than 2 decades, so 25 years of experience in working with pediatric populations in early intervention, in school-based services, and also in private outpatient clinics. So she's kind of done it all. She treats a varied caseload, including children with various feeding aversions, sensory processing disorder, developmental delays, autism spectrum disorders, neuromuscular dysfunction, and also genetic disorders. She's trained in various feeding methodologies, and she's Handwriting Without Tears Level 1 certified. She is the proud mom of 3 college-age kids, and she also enjoys traveling, reading, and playing pickleball. Y'all are going to love Laurie. Let's chat. Well, Laurie, I'm thrilled that you're here. We have a little bit of history, so I should probably explain. I know I gave like your official fancy bio, but back in 2009, we had our own NICU baby. And in 2010, he was not eating the way that he was supposed to be eating. And that is when I met you. And I had no idea that this sweet gal who's going to teach my kid how to eat would be someone that I text on a fairly regular basis and eat a lot of queso with. So, you became a very beloved member of our family. We spent a lot of time with you. And I think pediatrics and occupational therapists don't get enough press. So I want you to maybe explain to people like, what is an occupational therapist, particularly when it relates to pediatrics? Because I think sometimes when we think of occupational therapy, we think of like people going to work and we're like, but babies don't go to work. So what exactly does an OT do for pediatrics?
Right. That's a great question because you're right. The name is a little bit deceiving, but in pediatrics, OTs focus on building skills to help promote development, whether those are fine motor skills, whether it's grasping, feeding, addressing sensory issues. So it's anything that would affect a child's occupation, right? So child's occupation is to learn and grow and develop and become a student someday. So anything that's going to help build those skills is what OT would address.
Okay, that makes sense. So, I mean, there's lots of different therapies that kids can receive. They can get speech therapy, physical therapy. So, at least in our experience, we found that fortunately we were at a clinic that all of y'all were there. All y'all, can I say that? That's plural. All y'all were there together. So it was really great because y'all worked together. So, like when we were doing speech and then we were working with you, so there was really good communication. But that may not be the case with everybody when they go to therapy. They may go to one place for speech therapy, another place for occupational therapy, and another place for physical therapy. So if they're not in the same place, Laurie, what are some good suggestions that you may have to maybe give that parent some tools to get those people to all work together so that what they're learning or what they're doing in OT might also correlate with what they're doing in speech. Because I know those in particular go well together, at least in our case, they did.
They did. Yeah. So I would certainly want to work with the therapist on establishing the goals. It's always important to me when I'm doing an evaluation is to ask the parents, what do you expect to get out of occupational therapy? And so they are actually a partner with me as far as developing the goals, and they can actually get the plan of care and go talk to the speech therapist or the school, even if they're involved in the schools, and make sure that everybody's on the same page and that the goals are all encompassing, that they all work together. If they are in the same clinic, it works really well because sometimes we can do co-treats. Speech can work with OT at the same time, or PT and OT. There's a lot of overlap that can happen. So that is actually the best case scenario, is if it's all in the same clinic under one roof, then that makes life a little bit easier for everybody.
Yeah, I mean, I think probably our biggest challenge was knowing when to advocate for our child and when to let the doctor sort of tell us. We had a regular pediatrician, but then we also had a developmental pediatrician. And so we had a lot of eyes on our NICU baby, particularly because he spent a decent amount of time in the NICU. But it wasn't really until we started to transition from breastfeeding and milk feeds to a little bit more into cereal and solid foods that I started to see a lot of struggles. And I remember bringing that up to my pediatrician, and I was like, so normal, not normal? Like, I think that's the big challenge of a NICU parent is that we're never sure, is this a normal development thing or do I need to be more worried? So, my question to you, Lori, is at what, I guess, what would be some of the things that a parent might see that they should say, "Hey, maybe I should bring this up to my pediatrician," and then maybe that might lead to more therapy? I think that's a big line of knowing what's normal and when we need to ask for help. So what are some things that those parents might should maybe look for?
Right. I think it's a little trickier when it's the first child, right? Because the parents don't know what a normal developmental track may be. So that's something to consider for sure, and to maybe ask a few more questions of your pediatrician or developmental pediatrician if you're involved with them. So I think with the NICU kids, it's a little more important to push harder about getting therapy involved sooner. Sooner is always better than later. It's easier to address all of those issues. So if you notice that your child is not meeting developmental milestones, if you notice that they seem to have a big delay with sitting up or being able to roll over, with regard to feeding issues, if they are ongoing poor weight gain, they're just not doing well, they have any choking, gagging, coughing when they're trying to do feeds, if they're avoiding all foods within a certain category, like they'll avoid everything that's wet or they'll avoid everything that's white. There's all kinds of sensory issues that can come into play. Certainly that needs to be addressed as well. Um, Fewer than 20 foods is considered picky eating. Fewer than 10 foods, once a child is actually a toddler, is considered a problem feeder and certainly merits intervention at that point.
Man, those are things that I wish I had heard all those years ago with Luke. So, yeah, I mean, we definitely there were definitely some of those signs whenever I brought that to the attention of our pediatrician. But what we found is that Luke had a lot of sensory challenges. So, Lori, I know there's a lot of babies who spend maybe a short amount of time in the NICU. Maybe it's, 1 or 2 weeks, and then there are some who spend months, you know, triple days. We're talking, more than 100 days in the neonatal intensive care unit. And I think that they tend to walk out with a lot of challenges, particularly when it comes to feeding. What are some of the things that you see in pediatrics that maybe should put some parents on high alert, like, oh, yep, we're seeing that? Um, what are some of the challenges that NICU babies, aside from normal developing babies, maybe who are just picky eaters and sort of go down this different path? What's the difference between those two? What do you see whenever you're treating them?
From an OT perspective, red alerts really for me are the problem feeders. They frequently will develop oral aversions. They've had a lot of things done to their face. They've had NG tubes, they've had tape stuck on their face for many months, and they can develop aversions to being able to suck, swallow, breathe, and coordinating all of that. It's absolutely necessary at the time to do all those interventions, and it's important to do all of them. But there may be some unintended consequences that people need to be aware of down the line from all of that. Certainly, there are some sensory issues with many NICU babies. They've been in these environments where there may be a lot of lights, alarms, while, the NICUs are great and much better these days than they used to be about keeping the sound down and keeping it a very calm environment for the kids. Many times they will just come out and just kind of be on high alert all the time. And it's very difficult for them to regulate their sensory state so that they can even calm down to eat.
Yeah, I mean, I think we realized as parents, as they were intubating our son, and like you said, the tape and all the noise. And even though we were in a place where his second NICU that he was in was sort of an isolated room so we could shut the door, I don't think, Lori, I realized until we were maybe a year past being discharged from the NICU, just the toll that that took on him. And it really manifested itself in eating. And I think as a parent, certainly as a mom, my number one goal with my kids is to have them thrive. And I know the one thing that I can do for them is I can feed them, like I can help them grow and I can help them learn. And when a child doesn't eat, that touches a very deep part of a mom's heart that you think, man, am I doing this wrong? Like, this is the one thing that I thought I could do. I can't operate on my baby. I can't do procedures on my baby, but I can feed my baby. And when you can't feed your baby and they fall into this failure to thrive category, it hits a really hard part of your heart. So, Lori, for a parent who finds themselves in a place where their child is failure to thrive, they're not meeting some of the developmental milestones, what's some encouragement to you as they walk in the doors of that OT that things are going to get better, even though it feels like it's going to be the longest, tallest, biggest mountain that they have to climb?
Well, I think the biggest thing you can do is assemble a team of people that can support you. And certainly that's going to be the child's physician, his therapist, anybody involved in their care, but also care for you, because that's so important for the parents to be able to be fully present with their child. So if you can tap into your network of friends, if you can tap into counseling for yourself so that you can get some help and support to be able to manage all these big emotions, that's going to be only benefit your child down the road. Um, you can also reach out. There's a lot of online communities now, like Hand to Hold, that can help connect people that know what you're going through. So I think that that's helpful too. So I think it's important to keep the big picture in mind, that a lot of these kids will eventually meet some milestones that maybe you can't see them being able to meet at this time. So they may not ever eat that steak, they may not ever eat that hamburger, but they will eventually eat foods that they are not eating right now. They will eventually meet some milestones that maybe it's hard to see that right now. Don't listen to the negative people, and just remember that it's important to remember that every child is on their own unique journey, and every family's on their own unique journey. And you do have gifts that you can share with that child, that you're going to dig deep and you'll find them.
Yeah, I mean, I think, Lori, for us, I remember thinking, because I had other children, that I knew what the milestones should be. And when our son wasn't meeting some of those, one, I felt like a failure as a mom. I think that's a common feeling. And secondly, I think I had to reorient my heart to say, hey, it might take us 6 months to get him to be able to touch something like beans or sugar without throwing up, which that took us such a long time to be able to do. But we eventually got there, but I had to reframe, like, what my expectations were, and maybe just sort of say, "Okay, what's Luke's timeline? And let's be patient with that." But that was hard. So to a mom or a dad who's listening to this who thinks we are never gonna make progress, I think you brought up a good point, assembling a good team of people that you can ask questions to, like, what are realistic goals? Where should I reframe and reorient what my heart needs to hear and what my heart, can handle with my kid, and knowing that progress may look very different from one child to the next and one family to the next. This podcast is produced by Hand to Hold, a national nonprofit, but we're more than simply a podcast. Be sure to download our app, join one of our support groups, or find one-to-one support, enjoy counseling, find loss and bereavement support, participate in a peer-to-peer mentor program, or check out our news, articles, and family stories at handtohold.org. All of that is at no cost to you. Hand to Hold's mission is to provide personalized support before, during, and after a NICU stay to help ensure that all NICU families thrive. I know there's a lot of people who are listening to this, Laurie, who maybe have a child who has a G-tube. So, for a variety of issues, sometimes the G-tube allows them to maybe move out of that failure to thrive, but it also means that they're not using their mouth in a normal way of developing some of the things that you talked about. So what are some things that you see with babies who are G-tube fed that they tend to maybe struggle with that parents should maybe be on the lookout for?
Well, I see the G tubes can be a big blessing, honestly. It allows the kids and the parents to relax and take that pressure off of just take another bite, just take another bite. And there's this pressure that can develop around meal times that can just become unbearable. So the G tube allows everybody to take a step back and say, this child is still getting the nutrition that they need. And we can work on building these oral motor skills in a less stressful environment. One thing that I really do stress is if a child is G-tube fed, if they're able to sit up and do a little bit of small taste, then if they're safe to do that, it's important to be running the G-tube pump at the same time as family mealtime, and the child is up at the table with the rest of the family or close by, and that they're able to have a little bit of taste. So you're working on starting to develop them associating this oral input with a feeling of becoming full and starting to develop these patterns of being hungry versus feeling full. And it allows a lot of opportunity for them to develop these oral motor skills. Even with a normal developing child, usually like the first 4 to 6 months of a child learning to eat, like 6 to 9 or 12 months or so, we're just building skills. We're not really concerned about volume at all. We just want them to learn how to munch. We want to learn how to start gnawing on food without gagging. And so it's the same thing with a NICU baby on a G tube. It may just be on a different timeline than what a typically developing child may be on.
Well, I love that advice I remember meal times being really stressful. And I remember you telling us, like, don't put so much pressure on it being perfect, like just make progress. And, in my mind, I was like, but we have to get to this place. And you were like, just slow down. And I think I think that there are a lot of parents that probably can benefit from the reminder, like just having your baby at the dinner table, even though their mealtime may look very different than yours, still invites them into a space where it's supposed to be a joyful event as family sits
Right.
down at a dinner table and eats food and you nourish your child in whatever way that looks. That's some good advice. I like that a lot. Um what I know that there are some kids who are like heavy sensory seekers, like everything must be in their mouth, which sometimes is a good thing because you want them to eat. And sometimes you're like, that is a lot of things that are not supposed to be in your mouth, or a lot of body parts in your mouth that you're trying because they're super stimulated. Um, if you have a kid who's highly sensitized when it comes to oral input, Lori, what are some things that parents should consider or think about?
Right. I think if number one, if they're actually eating and swallowing, like chewing and swallowing non-food items, then that's cause for concern, clearly. And you need to get with your pediatrician or GI doctor because there may be some blood work that needs to be done if there's some sort of nutritional deficit that's not being met.
Yep.
So that's number one. Number two, if they need like that oral input, I think it's great. Go ahead and provide it to them. We're not going to end up swallowing our fist. It's okay for
Praise
them
the
to
Lord.
be, I know, right? um, but chewy tubes are a great tool. I love these chewy tubes. P's and Q's are my favorite. Um, Top Tools has some other really great chewy tubes, and they're just basically like these little silicone teether things that have these little, 3-inch sticks on them that the kids can put in their mouths. They've got like a little T on the end, so they're not going to swallow them. They also become great little tools to eat. So if they're actually doing some purees, they can start using that as a utensil to start dipping it in and putting that in their mouth. But the silicone allows them to do some chewing, munching, that can give the input that those kids are looking for.
That's awesome. I feel like so many things have come out in the last decade that I'm like, where was that 10 years ago? So
I
I
know
love,
it's
but
something
I mean,
great,
that's a
right?
reminder that like parents typically are the inventors of all these things because they're like, I wish that we had, and OTs as well. Like, I wish that we had this thing and then we develop it and it becomes this other great tool. We'll be sure to link all those in the show notes. So if you're furiously writing them down, don't worry about it. We'll put them in the show notes. Um, Lori, I guess my last like technical question for you is when you're trying to help your child tolerate new foods, what are some things that you can do? I know you talked about having them at the dinner table, but what are some things that parents can do to really start to move their kids into that ability to just tolerate new foods, new taste, new textures?
So I think it's really important with kids that are actually starting to do some oral intake to always have some foods there on the table that are safe for the kid, that they're willing to eat and they're staples for them, but also to start putting a little bit on their plate of things that would be physically safe for them to eat, but maybe the child just hasn't gotten around to eating them yet, or they're showing some aversion to them. See if we can put just a little teaspoon worth of that food on their plate. And if they can tolerate that, then see if we can start adding a little bit more and a little bit more. If they don't tolerate that, then they can see about putting a napkin over it or pushing it aside, putting it on a different plate that's next to their plate. So there's lots of, it just depends on the child, right? There's a lot of things that we can do to work them towards accepting more foods. Um, I also like the idea of doing it in a non-pressure environment. So you may want to consider adding in another snack time where they have like an adventure time and they're ready to try some new things. And it may be not at mealtime when everybody's stressed out and all eyes are on the child, and that just makes things uncomfortable for everybody. There's a lot of pressure there. Just kind of doing it in a playful way where we're making beet tattoos or something like that, where we're actually playing with food and making it more fun in the afternoons or in the mornings around away from mealtime.
Right. Well, and so mealtime becomes a time for celebration and not stress, and instead of this epic battle, which I think many parents, certainly if you've been to an OT or you have a child who's getting ready to go to occupational therapy, the battle you are very well aware of. So, Lori, my last question, and I ask this to every guest, is what's the one piece of advice that you would give to a parent who has a child in occupational therapy?
Consistent attendance is so important. We only have them for an hour or two a week. And so if they're not actually coming, then that makes the road that much longer. If the therapist gives you things to work on at home, then try as hard as you can to implement the suggestions that they're doing at home. Like I said, we've only got an hour or two with the child a week. And so most of the therapy is actually happening at home from the parents. It's that piece of it is very, very important. The other piece I would say is to make sure that you are with a therapist that you connect with. You are likely to be spending a lot of time with this person, and you need to be able to trust them and possibly have some hard conversations with them. And it's so important to seek out therapy in an environment where you can build that trust and work with that person.
Spoken like someone who knows what they're talking about. Lori, thank you so much for all your good advice. Okay, y'all, time for my 2-minute take. There was a lot of good stuff in there. Lori, I find to be, you know, I didn't even mention this when I was visiting with her, but I've never been in the presence of a therapist that literally like we would sit there and she would say, "All right, Catherine, I'm going to go to the store and we're going to find something that this kid can eat." And she was relentless. And I think that's one thing that she brought up, at least in some of the questions that I asked her, is that finding a good occupational therapist and having a good team of people can can radically change how you parent your child in the sense that mealtimes do not become a battlefield. I wanted my kids to eat, and I certainly wanted my NICU baby who was failure to thrive and really struggling. I wanted him to eat. And it took us a long time to get there. We were 4 years in therapy, but finally, Laurie and Luke, my kid, worked super hard and we got Luke to where he needed to be. And it might look different than where another kid needs to be. And I think that was the big takeaway, at least from me with Laurie, was that every kid has their own journey. Every kid is going to respond to therapy in a different way. And one win for one kid may look very different than another win from another kid. I think that being a good advocate for your child is maybe the thing that I took away the most from Laurie's interview. And also the fact that I think sometimes we think like as NICU parents, when we acquire new hardware, like a new IV, a new device, a G tube, a wheelchair, whatever it may be, sometimes we can see that as a setback or as just one more thing. And I think what Laurie reminded me of is that sometimes that device, sometimes that thing that you acquire can actually relieve your stress. And certainly in the case of feeding therapy, sometimes a G tube can allow you to be like, all right, we're going to take this thing and we're going to set it over here for a minute because we're going to focus on this thing. And it just makes things easier. So I don't know what tool, what device it is that a therapist is encouraging you to try or to do, but just know that it really could be the thing that could change your dinner table. So I hope that some of the advice that Laurie gave you in there, some of the people that she told you would be great resources. Also, some of the things that we link in the show notes and she visits about in her interview about tools that can help your child learn how to be a better eater in whatever way that looks like. I think that she was a treasure trove of information. I hope you enjoyed that as much as I did. And as always, I will see you next time. Thanks, y'all, for listening to NICU Babies Parent Support. Every parent and every experience is welcome here. If you are a NICU parent and you're finding yourself in need of support, please download our app. You can find it in the Apple Store or on Google Play, Hand to Hold. And if you love today's episode, you can share it, you can subscribe, and you can most certainly review it. We would love, love, love your reviews. It's how we reach more NICU parents. Thanks, and I'll see y'all next time.